Hello and welcome to Everfree Radio. I am your host, Brushin Bones.
I'm Crescendo.
And I'm Moonlight.
And today we are bringing to you our review of Season 1, Episode 1 and 2, the two-parter that started it all, Friendship is Magic. Now, it's been a long time in coming, and with this dry spell for summer of 2012, we wait for Season 3 to be finished up and put on television. We're going to go ahead and take a look back at the season that it all began with this Brony fandom. So, we'll have at least a little bit of pony to fill our time while we wait for the horrible, horrible dry spell of no new pony episodes to finally end.
So we get a little bit of pony, and then a lot of pony.
What are we going to do in Season 3 yet? We won't have any more pony to review.
We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Don't think too far ahead. You're going to make us worry too early for no good reason.
We'll take out the DeLorean. That's what we'll do.
Oh, gosh.
That sounds like a plan to me.
Okay, so it all began with a book opening up to the classic words, Once Upon a Time. And it tells us all about Equestria. Not exactly how Equestria was made, but more so that in the past, there were two unicorn sisters. And despite the fact that they have both a unicorn horn and Pegasus wings, they do use the specific word unicorn. I'm making sure to share this with you because throughout the fandom, we have some words that we have come to associate with the princesses. Princess Celestia and Luna and Mi Amore Cadenza. They have unicorn horn and Pegasus wings and all of the abilities therein. So the fans took it upon themselves to come up with their own name for what they are that differentiates them between your generic unicorn and your generic Pegasus. It's pretty divided between the use of alicorn and pegacorn, but I'd say that alicorn is probably the majority. Or
just plain out winged unicorn as well. That's pretty commonly used.
Yeah.
I think it should be Unisys. That'd be awesome.
A Unisys? I think that sounds a little bit too much like UNICEF. It reminds me of those Trick or Treat for UNICEF commercials.
It makes me think of a car. Try the new Unisys today.
But you don't drive an alicorn. I guess you could, maybe, somehow.
Well, we haven't been introduced to any humans in the series yet, so nobody's had to ride one.
You could attach a steering wheel to the horn.
Oh, gosh. Well, the only reason I bring this up is because one of our fellow staff members tends to get really, really volatile about the whole alicorn pegacorn thing, stating that because they are canonically called unicorns in the first episode, that they should be referred to as such, and that everyone should at least be educated about this factoid. That way they can choose for themselves whether they want to use the fanon term or the canon term. So we decided to do him the service of informing everyone they were called unicorns in the first episode. As for me personally, I always generally just refer to them as alicorn, because while I know that an alicorn is actually the term for a unicorn's horn, it's easier to differentiate the princesses with a term that separates them from the unicorns, because they are very clearly and very blatantly shown to be more powerful than your generic unicorn, more powerful than your generic Pegasus.
I personally think we should just use the term princesses, because all three of them are princesses. The only three that we've seen in the show are princesses, and until a time we come across one that isn't a princess, I think princess is a safe word to use.
I'm just curious as to whether or not later on in the show, Season 3, Season 13, however many seasons this show gets.
Season 42.
I'm just wondering if we will ever see a prince. Not a prince like Prince Blueblood, or a prince like how I guess you might be able to consider Shining Armor a prince, since he has now married a princess, but an actual prince in the term of a winged unicorn, alicorn, pegacorn prince.
Unisys.
Now, I get that a lot of people are going to be like, oh, they're probably never going to do that, or it's just wishful thinking on the part of the male viewers, or, there's enough of that crud in fan fiction. But you do have to kind of wonder if they're ever going to introduce one. Anyways, we have gotten way off the beaten path here.
What's this about an episode? We're talking about an episode here?
Yes. So back to the actual episode review. We are being told the story, as narrated by Princess Celestia, eventually transitioning into the voice of our main protagonist, Twilight Sparkle. We are being told the story of the Mare in the Moon, Nightmare Moon, who was the sister who brought up the moon for the night, who became jealous of the daylight's popularity with pony kind, while all of the unicorns and Pegasi and earth ponies slept through and shunned her beautiful night. So she got jealous of her sister and decided, you know what, I'm just going to make the night last forever. And the bitterness and anger in her heart transformed her into an evil mare of darkness, Nightmare Moon.
See, this could have all been averted if she just asked the ponies, why do you always sleep through my night? She jumps to assumptions and thinks, oh, they must dislike the night. I must become evil and make it night forever.
Well, Crescendo, think about it this way. When we actually do see Luna later on, when she comes back, she asks every pony to kneel before her.
Well, and see, what you gotta understand is 1,000 years ago, they had a very different culture as well, as is shown with the whole royal cantaloupe voice, the speaking with the traditional royal we, all of that sort of thing. In the past, 1,000 years ago, when she was imprisoned, and before that, they had a very clear-cut view that the royalty was above the common folk. I get this feeling that she wasn't going to stoop so low as to have to ask, why do you hate my night? The night in her eyes was a thing of beauty, and that they chose to sleep through it at all for any reason kind of seemed like they were shunning it. Now, admittedly, if you were to take a little bit of logical thinking beyond the idea of what a children's show will normally provide, most creatures, horses, or even us humans, are not nocturnal. And creatures that are sapient and do stuff like farming and stuff like that work during the daytime because that's the most effective time to work. And when they work during the day and are awake during the day, they are, of course, going to sleep through the night. And of course, if you get into the whole concept of what would actually happen if the day were to never come again and it would be night eternal, Nightmare Moon obviously wasn't thinking very clearly, because if she was to never allow the sun to be raised again, entire crops would fail, and probably there would be a lot of weird tidal shifting because the moon never alters its position in the sky anymore, and all that other sort of stuff. Deep thinking that you're not going to ever see from a children's show, but hey, you know what? That's my shtick. That's what I do. So we get the whole introduction about about how the Mare in the Moon came to be, and Twilight is curious about it because she's certain she heard about that somewhere important. And then we get our opening, classic opening. Oh man, brings back memories now, doesn't it?
This is going to be a good trip through memory lane, isn't it?
I think everybody's first time hearing that opening, they just sat there and poker-faced their way through the entire thing.
It's actually funny coming back and watching this opening now that I've gotten so used to the Season 2 opening, because with the Season 2 opening, you've got the Ponyville rail line that leads through Ponyville to Canterlot, and
they've really been pushing that train these days, haven't they?
Well, they want to sell the trains. I have a niece. She is 3 years old, and I will tell you what, she loves that train set. She loves it.
Hey, kids love trains. It's a statistical fact that kids love trains.
Well, so does Sheldon Cooper, and everybody loves him.
I guess that you could say then they've been on one train of thought.
Oh gosh. Is this what we're going to be subjected to? The puns. Oh,
you know me.
No, it's a nice trip through memory lane, because it's been a while since I've actually gone back and watched the first season, and watching the old opening, the difference in the way the audio sounds and the difference in some of the characters in the background. Like, instead of Big Mac, we have the Big Mac styled caramel and no train, and that
is caramel man.
So, ending the opening theme, we have Twilight Sparkle going back towards her home, And at this time, she's currently living in Canterlot. And I kind of wish they would have dove into Twilight's life in Canterlot a bit more. Now that I think about it, we've gotten so far, we've finished up the second season, because she meets 3 ponies, one of which is fan name for her is Colgate, or full name was it Romana T. Colgate, because a lot of people like to imagine her as being Romana because, like Dr. Hooves, she has an hourglass cutie mark. So more Hoovian stuff for you out there.
See, after we've seen the season 2 finale, you just gotta think now, how many of them are changelings?
Well, the whole changeling thing is an interesting way of kind of like throwing a sort of hand wave to all of the various different character clones you see in the backgrounds and the foregrounds of various different episodes, the different copy-pasted pony models. It's just like, there were changelings present. It makes so much sense.
Like that one scene where we have, 8 Lyras?
And a fair few bonbons?
Oh, that scene was great.
I think that was the Iron Will episode, was it not?
No, they were like all on the bleachers. I think it was Sister Who's Social.
But yeah, so changelings spying on Ponyville for the past couple of years.
You have to wonder where they came from, though. I get the feeling that they didn't come from the Everfree Forest, so I'm kind of curious where their country or domain of origin is. But getting back
We're getting a bit off topic there. Let's head back to the episode.
Getting back to episode 1, we see 3 ponies telling Twilight Sparkle that there's a party going on and she should come over and hang out. And Twilight's like, oh, but I've got lots of studying, bye. And she runs off. And of course, the ponies are like, we think she might like books more than she likes making friends.
It makes you wonder, though. She uses the word study. Now, the word study is used mainly, like, in terms of schoolwork. Oh, I've got to study for an exam. When people read when they're adults, you don't really hear them say, oh, I've got to study this book or whatever. It's more just reading is a leisurely activity, so...
She is still Celestia's student, so I can imagine that Celestia might give her various different bookwork-oriented lessons.
That's quite possible.
Especially since Celestia is very busy. I mean, Celestia is a monarch, She is the princess, at this point in time, the only princess of the Principality of Equestria, whatever you want to call it. And she has her work cut out for her because she has to raise the sun and she has to raise the moon, which actually brings up an interesting question of just how much stress she must have had on her for the past 1,000 years that Luna had been sealed in the moon, because we know that she gets tired. And in the season finale of season 2, Luna shows up and tells her sister, rest. As always, I will guard the night. So it's like, we know that it takes a lot of work out of Celestia to handle the daytime. For her to take on the workload of both night and day, did she ever sleep? Was she just like miserable for thousands of years?
I think she's quite like that one episode of Futurama where Fry has 100 cups of coffee and Celestia just drinks coffee all the time.
It becomes part of the Speed Force.
Yep.
No. She doesn't drink coffee. She eats coffee cake.
She eats coffee cake. What is this deal with Celestia and cake? It's weird.
Celestia just likes cake.
I mean,
leave it.
How can you not like cake, Bones?
Just ask Pinkie Pie.
Oh, okay. Well, we find Twilight goes back to her, I guess it's her home, or if it's just either the Canterlot library or her home or something, but she goes back to there and has her assistant, Spike the Dragon, help her find the book that she is looking for, which has notations about the elements of harmony in it, which then directs her to another book, Mare in the Moon, which, according to Spike, is just, an old mare's tale. So she looks in it and she realizes that the Mare in the Moon is in fact Nightmare Moon, and it's going, and that, this upcoming summer sun celebration is going to be the time at which she will be free. That'll mark the 1,000th year, and she intends to warn Celestia. And throughout this whole thing, you kind of get this almost snobbish sort of attitude from Twilight. At least I got this idea as she's walking around dictating the letter, that she was very, very full of herself. It seemed like she had discovered something that no pony else had possibly known about, and she kind of like immediately assumes that Celestia had no idea, and that this will be something that Celestia will really need to know. So when she dictates the letter to Spike to write to Celestia, and gets her reply back, which is simply Celestia saying, "You need to get your head out of those dusty old books," she is very taken aback by it.
When story descends into something of legend, I mean, it has been 1,000 years, you've got to admit, not many people will know about it, especially that it's been 1,000 years since that fateful day. So she kind of has discovered something that no one else really has.
Well, and you get this feeling that Twilight doesn't know that Celestia is the sister in the story who sealed Nightmare Moon within the moon. She gets this feeling like Celestia doesn't know about how the story is supposed to work, that Celestia was not the princess of legend, that maybe she's just descended from the princess of legend or whatever, but you get this feeling like Twilight thinks this is really important. She needs to inform the princess because the princess doesn't know, but the princess does know because it was her who sealed Luna in the moon.
Yeah.
So when she gets the response back and is told, well, they have to go and check on some stuff for the Summer Sun celebration, which is supposed to be being held in Ponyville this year, they decide to fly off to Ponyville. They take their what was it? Did they take the they take the carriage, I think.
Yeah, they take the carriage.
Yeah, they do take the carriage. I don't know why I forgot that all of a sudden, but maybe it's just because the balloon comes up.
Pinky's air balloon.
And we never really see her associate with the Royal Guard very much after this, except for like when the Royal Guard show up, when Fluttershy takes the Phoenix and tries to help the Phoenix. They show up to tell Twilight Sparkle that the Phoenix had been taken by somebody. And then, like, in the season finale, we find out that her older brother, who, has just basically been retconned into existence, we find out that her older brother is captain of the Royal Guard.
Speaking of Pinkie Pie, when Twilight lands, we get our very first glimpse of Pinkie Pie.
Yes, we do. We get our first glance of Pinkie Pie, and what does Pinkie Pie do? She does that very, very, very iconic gasp of hers.
And then runs off into oblivion.
That soundbite has actually been reused and even reversed in the show at different points. So so it is pretty iconic for both the fans and probably, I guess, the creators too. It's an important little bit of sound. So
I do like how of Twilight's 5 friends that she makes in this episode, Pinkie Pie is the first one she meets, yet the last one we find the personality of, because she dashes off as soon as she meets Twilight.
I don't know, I'm having this kind of difficulty reconciling how Pinkie Pie acts in the very beginning with how she acts later on. Because when she meets Twilight Sparkle in episode 1, she gasps and immediately runs away. And we later learned that it was to prepare a party to welcome her to Ponyville. When we get to the episode where she meets Cranky Doodle Donkey, rather than running off to prepare a party, she badgers him the entirety of the episode. She's just an annoyance the entire episode, trying to get him to be her friend. And it's like, she didn't really act that way with Twilight. Why did she act that way with Cranky Doodle Donkey?
Well, I think with Cranky Doodle Donkey, he was quite visibly. She did the whole smile song, right? He wasn't smiling. He was just sort of like, hello there. He, like, unlike Twilight, he didn't really give off an aura of friendliness. I mean, Twilight's at least somewhat friendly.
Well, yeah, she did try to smile and give, like, a greeting and stuff.
There's also the fact that Twilight is a little more receptive than Cranky Doodle Donkey, at least. I mean, while she does storm off, she's not grumpy about it, at least in front of Pinkie. And for the first few minutes of the party, she tries to participate until she drinks the hot sauce, that is.
Yeah. So, after meeting Pinkie Pie, she heads on over to Sweet Apple Acres, and we get our first little introductory bit with Applejack, who was shown bucking the apples off of a tree all in one go. She does that little crossing her hooves thing that she's sort of renowned for.
Now, a fun little fact, a few people probably know about AJ, but as was found out during our interview with Ashley Ball, the voice actress for Applejack and Rainbow Dash, AJ's voice in the first 2 episodes, I believe, is much higher than it is in the rest of the series.
It's not really much higher, I'd say, but it is higher. And
it is definitely noticeable.
It is noticeably different from how her voice develops, but I think that's really more, kind of just the that's just the voice actresses finding their characters,
Yeah.
Oh, of course.
So Twilight and Spike are here to test the food, essentially, to see how the food is going to hold up for the Summer Sun celebration, because it seems like the Apple family gets put in charge of just about everything when it comes down to any sort of big shindig. You'd almost think that it would be the main bakery of Ponyville, Sugar Cube Corner, that would be in charge of organizing the food for a big celebration like this, but no, it's the Apple family. So they are treated to a gigantic pile of food. You got your apple fritters, your apple pies, your candy apples, your apple flavored cupcakes and cakes with apple topping and all sorts of crazy dishes. One of these things looks like a freaking chocolate lava cake, but with an apple stuck right in the middle of it.
Come to think of it, Pinkie Pie is the only one of the main 6 who isn't really helping out with the celebrations.
Oh yes, and let's not forget the little animation error that when Applejack shoves an apple into Twilight's mouth, it is a green apple. And when Twilight spits out the chewed up pieces of it, they are red. So we'll just say that that's unicorn magic doing funny things to the food, I guess. Oh yes, and this is also where we are very first introduced to Apple Bloom with her her iconic little "Ain't you gonna stay for brunch?" and the big puppy dog eyes.
Too much cute.
Daw. But of course, Twilight's in a hurry, and she's got this opinion of Ponyville ponies already that they aren't exactly sane. So they're like, oh yeah, okay, the food's great. Everything looks fantastic. We need to go. So they head on out, stuffed to the brim with food because of Apple Bloom asking if they were going to stay for brunch. And then we meet our next of the main 6, Rainbow Dash, who just flat out crashes into Twilight. Even going so far as to manage to land them in the only mud puddle in all of Ponyville at the time.
How was there a mud puddle if it looks like it hasn't been raining?
I don't know.
Well, there could be mud puddles for all sorts of reasons, like maybe someone spilled a bucket of water.
Well,
I don't know.
Conveniently.
Very quickly, she is washed off with rainwater from a little cloud that Rainbow Dash brings over. And then when she's soaking wet, Rainbow Dash uses a really quick little tornado to dry her hair. But of course, as you all know, if you are female or if you are a guy who happens to have long hair and thus has to deal with the maintenance of such, her hair looks like an absolute mess afterwards. Both Spike and Rainbow Dash laugh at the lovely little do that Twilight is now sporting. So Rainbow Dash gives her little introduction, saying, who she is, what she does, all that sort of stuff.
Why she's the best.
Why she's the best at what she does.
And why she's the best pony.
Of course, Twilight doesn't really believe her at first because, there are a bunch of clouds in the sky. And Rainbow Dash is like, well, I'm training for the Wonderbolts, and this stuff will be really easy to clean up. And it's like, oh, really? Prove it. 10 seconds flat. That's all you have to know.
And thus was the birthing of a meme.
And that's all she wrote.
Rainbow Dash is probably responsible for half of the memes that come out of this show.
No, I'd say she's responsible for 20% of them.
We've just made it 20% more mimetic.
Of course.
Okay. Well, she shows off her incredible flying skills, and then, of course, Twilight is impressed. She kind of played on Rainbow Dash's ego to get the clouds cleaned up pretty quickly, although she is generally impressed.
At least Rainbow delivered, what she said she could.
Yep. And of course, this is kind of how the episode goes on. We get little snippets and introductions to who are going to be our main protagonists for the entirety of the series. Next up, we get Rarity, who is, of course, if you have to say it, she is probably the most girly of the main six, just because she is the prissy, prim, and proper one that is into fashion and all of that stuff. She is the most stereotypically girly of probably any of the ponies, with the love for fashion and the designing of the dresses and owning a boutique and being very, very...
What about Fluttershy?
Focused on her... Well, see, there's a difference between being timid and being girly.
No, Fluttershy is pretty girly, too.
She is pretty girly, but I'm saying the most stereotypically girly. Like, when you think of stereotypical girliness, especially in a pony show, you think of the fashion and you think of, like, all of the generic stuff that Hasbro tries to sell girls.
Actually, when I think the stereotypes of girls with regards to a pony show, I think more of the stereotype of girls loving animals.
Well, you watch too much anime.
That's not an anime thing. That's a Western cartoon sort of thing.
I don't know, man, because...
The anime thing is the timid moe trait.
Well, that's why the Japanese fans have made Fluttershy an honorary Japanese. So, there you go. Because she is the most, quote-unquote, Yamato Nadeshiko of all of the characters. Therefore, she has been made an honorary Japanese. But, getting back to the subject at hand, Rarity owns Carousel Boutique. It is the fashion spot of Ponyville, and she is the fashionista of the group. She is very, very prissy, very prim, very proper. She's even got that odd non-accent thing going for her, where it's like you can't really call it a specific kind of accent because it doesn't really come from anywhere. It's kind of that generic, almost like movie. It's like a Hollywood accent. It's almost made up. But it's very suitable, it suits her very well. So the moment she sees Twilight, she is immediately beset with horror at the sight of her of her mane and her tail because of the whole issue that happened with Rainbow Dash. So immediately sets about trying to fix up Twilight with a nice look, including... I guess it's the pony equivalent of a corset. It's some sort of corset saddle. Clearly works the same way, since Twilight has trouble speaking the entire time Rarity's attempting to get her into it. Tries a few other looks on her before she tries the little corset jewel-ridden saddle. One of which I think we should probably bring up is the fact that one of the dresses Twilight tries on is actually the dress that Twilight later asks to fix a button on because she intends to wear it to the gala. And Rarity says, oh, no, you can't wear that to the gala. And I find that kind of funny because it was one of the dresses that she was trying on in episode 1.
Son of a gun. They are the same dress.
The thing is, though, that this dress, in the first episode at least, would be used for just everyday wear. It would be fine for that, but the Grand Galloping Gala is just a huge event that needs something grand and spectacular to be
Are you assuming that Rarity was just giving her everyday clothing? Because I don't know if I would call that corset saddle everyday clothing. I think that's more like hot date clothing. Or the pony equivalent thereof.
It's certainly not Grand Galloping Gala clothing.
Well, I'm certain that Twilight wouldn't be caught dead in a corset at the Grand Galloping Gala, but... but she's there to see how everything's going on for the Summer Sun celebration. And of course, everything is fine. Next stop on our list is Fluttershy, who is training, or rather, I should say, giving a rehearsal, I guess you would call it, to her birds, her little songbird choir. The Blue Jay isn't doing a very good job.
No, he's not.
And of course, we see that she is a very, very soft-spoken, very, very timid little creature.
What was that, Bones? I think you need to speak up.
Fluttershy would reply with a... But when Twilight attempts to introduce herself, Fluttershy is so incredibly timid that not only can she not speak up loudly enough for Twilight to actually hear the introduction, she actually starts to get visibly afraid at this pony who is verbally accosting her although Twilight's really not doing anything of the sort. She's actually being very civil.
Actually, I kind of find this introduction of Fluttershy to be rather interesting because they really, really play up how timid she is just for this one introduction. All the other times she's introduced to people for the rest of the series, she's never quite that timid again.
Yeah. Well, and then we also see her excitement, like her overabundance of excitement when it comes to new animals that she hasn't met before.
Yes.
When she sees Spike the dragon, she's like, oh, I've never met a baby dragon before. And she is very interested in Spike. Almost to the point of like uncomfortably interested in Spike just because she is like literally invading his personal space. And Twilight's like, oh, he's a baby dragon. We better get back to some place so that he can have a nap. And Fluttershy goes so far as to pick him up and says, oh, poor thing, he must be exhausted, and tries to fly off with him. And so, moving forward from the meeting with Fluttershy, who is in fact following them after they leave the little forest area where she was practicing with the Songbird Choir, she is so incredibly interested in Spike that she just will not let it go. And of course, Twilight Sparkle gets to the library where she is now going to be rooming for her time in Ponyville, only to find a surprise party thrown by who else? Pinkie Pie, the pony who sneezes confetti and carries around a party cannon with her everywhere.
Just where does she store that party cannon?
We get Derpy for the first time ever!
And thus the mascot was born.
Yep. Although her eyes are on Derp for most of this whole thing.
Well, it wasn't really until season 2 that it was done on purpose. After all, it was an animation error.
It was just an error at the time. You could almost say that perhaps Derpy didn't go cross-eyed until after Twilight arrived. So maybe Twilight is indirectly responsible for Derpy's eye issues. And Twilight is so frustrated with the events of the day. She is having such a trying time because she thinks all of these ponies are absolutely insane. She decides she needs to pour herself a drink. She inadvertently pours herself hot sauce. How she could start drinking until she had a mouthful of the stuff and not notice it was hot sauce is beyond me, but...
I can do that. It's not really that hard to do that. I mean, I do that sometimes, but I put a lot of hot sauce on my food.
Oh gosh. The hot sauce is apparently so hot that it turns her mane into a mane of fire, and she has to run off. And of course, the opinions on Twilight amongst the other ponies vary. So, and then we see Pinkie pour hot sauce on a cupcake. Dear gosh. She must have an iron stomach.
I've kind of actually done that before.
I have to say, in this scene, I love the looks everybody gives Pinkie Pie at this point. They're all disgusted, as if, what are you doing, Pinkie Pie?
Indeed.
I don't know about you, but it's delicious. Depending on the kind of cupcake, like bacon and cheese cupcakes.
Yeah, see, I don't believe that bacon and cheese should be inside of a cake. Like, if it's cream cheese, it can be inside or on a cake. But
well, technically,
bacon,
it's a muffin.
Well, if it's a muffin, then it's a muffin, then it's not a cupcake. They're two different things, Moonlight.
But I kind of used cake mix sort of thing for the mix them. Anywho, moving on to the party.
So Twilight's staying in her room, a pillow shoved over her head, trying to block out the noise. And Spike, in one of the most hilarious of under-the-radar moments in the show, comes waddling into the room with a lampshade on his head. They're partying pretty hard out there. For those of you who don't know what a lampshade is, what the lampshade being on the head is all about, you'll probably know once you get a little bit older and experience some of your first parties. So, Spike tries to get Twilight to come out of her room. Twilight does not want to come out of her room because, in her own words, these ponies are all crazy.
They kind of are for somebody who's used to the quiet life of studying books and not really having friends. It's a completely new environment for her, so yeah, that's crazy to Twilight. The Spike is apparently loving it.
Well, they kind of are a bit crazy. Their personalities are so extreme in the way they're presented. If you were to go up to someone like that in real life, would you consider them crazy?
Though, in any TV show, really, cartoons, dramas, comedies, etc., no matter what, you'll never find a quote-unquote normal person.
Everybody usually has very
This is
exaggerated quirks in television.
Because watching a show about people who share the same type of life you do would probably be kind of boring.
Yeah, it probably would. But it's at this point when she's looking up at the sky, thinking about the whole Mare and the Moo thing. We see the 4 big stars, the 4 really bright, shining stars that are supposed to aid in her escape. As is prophesied, that the stars will aid in her escape. This is something that really actually kind of bugs me, that they didn't go into a little bit more in the follow-up season or even later episodes of season 1 is just because, and I'm hoping that they'll maybe do it in season 3 or something like that. Maybe if Luna gets some more Luna-centric episodes, is they never really go into how these stars aided in her escape or what stars these were. They're just these 4 big, bright, random stars that just sort of like they shine for a while, and then like during the celebration, the Mare and the Moon disappears and then shows up as Nightmare Moon, and it's kind of just like, oh well, there you go. It seems like they almost wasted an opportunity with this whole thing, because like you gotta think that there must be some reason these stars were able to unbanish Nightmare Moon, free her from her moony prison.
Though, with the whole Nightmare Moon appearing, like, with her being free, you see the shadow on the moon, and then the stars close in on the moon, and then the shadow disappears, which would imply that she's just been released. Then only moments later, the curtains open to reveal no Celestia standing on the balcony. Now, it makes you think, did Celestia just accept the fact that she's going to be kidnapped by her sister?
See, that's an assumption, too. We have no idea what happened to Celestia or where Celestia was.
We don't really know if she was kidnapped or not.
The ponies automatically make the assumption that Nightmare Moon has done something with Celestia, but Celestia shows up when Nightmare Moon is defeated as if nothing happened at all, which kind of makes you think, did Celestia literally just sit back and let the ponies think she was kidnapped or whatever? I kind of get this feeling that Celestia, knowing that Twilight Sparkle automatically, she was the centerpiece, and Celestia even said as much. She was aware of that whole thing. That's why she sent Twilight Sparkle to Ponyville and told her to try making friends, is because she knew she couldn't use the elements of harmony to help Luna. And there's a couple interesting fan opinions on why that is that make a lot of sense, but I'll go ahead and spare you those.
Celestia's obviously just lazy, because she sits back and lets them do their own thing in the Discord episodes too.
which is kind of interesting, why she doesn't do something against Discord. It's like she could at least try to quell the whole chaos, even if she doesn't have the elements of harmony.
We'll see what happened when she tried to stop the Changeling Queen, Chrysalis.
Yeah, but
she was just beaten. She's out of practice.
I guess you could easily say that Discord is more powerful than Celestia and Luna, especially since, like, he can control every aspect of the world with literally just a snap. He is essentially, for all intents and purposes, he is a Q of this universe. For all of you Star Trek fans out there, with the simple snap of his fingers, he can do anything. Turn a dirt road into soap. He can turn all of Ponyville into some crazy upside down version of, a criminal's idea of what Candyland might look like.
He could turn every pony into stone, but he doesn't turn ponies into stone.
It's very interesting being a statue, but you wouldn't know that, would you? Because I don't turn ponies into stone.
Bones, our resident voice actor. Getting back to the episode.
But yeah, he's probably more powerful than Celestia. That doesn't mean that Celestia and Luna couldn't do anything to try to, mitigate the damage being done to the world. Unless, like, for all intents and purposes, their power is simply not useful against Discord, and the only thing he is weak against is the elements of harmony, which I suppose makes sense, since the elements of harmony are essentially his exact polar opposite, since he is Discord. He is the vengeful spirit of disharmony and chaos. But that's all getting far off track. But essentially, Celestia chose to sit by the sidelines is the generally believed idea because she knew that Twilight Sparkle and her friends would come through and use the elements of harmony to help her sister. She was running one heck of a Xanatos gambit there, but,
Yeah, I like to think that Celestia is just sitting back because she's preparing Twilight and her friends for something. I don't know what. But she's just preparing them to, wield the elements of harmony because she and her sister can't anymore, or something along those lines.
Yeah. But, of course, we go to the Summer Sun celebration where Celestia is supposed to raise the sun for everybody in a big, flashy display. And the curtains
Did we already
draw.
cover this?
Nightmare Moon shows up.
We already talked about
I know,
this.
I'm just rehashing since we kind of got far off the beaten track. And then the curtains draw. No one's there. Nightmare Moon appears in a swirl of starry, inky, magical mistiness. She does her little laugh and her Maleficent thing with the bacufoles. And they're, of course, accusing her, what'd you do with Celestia? And Twilight steps forward and says, I know who you are. You're Nightmare Moon. And that's the end of part 1.
And this ends the start of a very awesome series. And the beginning of not just a fandom, but at this point, it's almost a culture.
Kind of is.
Subculture.
It's a subculture, a brony subculture. And so, going into the second part, Friendship is Magic, part 2, the second episode of the first season, we, of course, see some more of Nightmare Moon and her maliciousness. I guess you could say her big, bad evilness. She's really not that evil. She's just misunderstood.
It's okay because it was a separate entity making her evil.
No. Let's not go there.
I think Bones is swelling up with rage.
Yeah, we don't need to bring up the whole Wuna thing and the whole idea that there's this huge.
Here we go again.
There's this huge section of the pony fandom. Huge section of the pony fandom that places all of the blame for all of the ills of Equestria squarely on Princess Celestia's head, saying that Luna was just misunderstood and she's actually the kind-hearted. They treat Luna like she's the Fluttershy of princesses, and Celestia is this big, bad, evil, sun-wielding tyrant who is just got everyone under her iron hoof. And it's ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous. People treat Nightmare Moon almost as if she's this character, for those of you who are old enough, or for those of you who like to read comics and are into Marvel Comics Spider-Man, or were around for the 90s television show that aired on Fox Kids and stuff like that, you're familiar with the character of Venom and how Venom came to be. And you're familiar with what the symbiote is. It's this alien being that bonds with whoever wears it and starts to enhance their aggression and their violent behavior while simultaneously eating away at all of the parts of them that are good and also kind of killing them. It's actually less a symbiote and more of a parasite, but they call it the symbiote. There is a huge amount of fans in the pony fandom who think that the only reason that Luna became Nightmare Moon is because of this entity that they have decided to call, quote unquote, the Nightmare. And what it is essentially this magical thing, this eldritch being that takes away all of the good stuff and enhances all of the bad stuff. It's essentially the pony version of a symbiote. And that's the real reason why she became Nightmare Moon. It wasn't her fault. She was just a sad widow Wuna who was sad, and she had a sad, and then the nightmare came and made her into Nightmare Moon, and just nobody understands. Now, you're free to have your own opinion. You can think whatever you want to think about the character of Luna. I think it's a load of rubbish. That's just my personal opinion. So, there we go. So, back to the episode. Everybody comes to Twilight. And by everybody, I mean the main protagonists. We've got Applejack, Pinkie Pie, Rainbow Dash, Fluttershy, Rarity. Show up at the library because they think that Twilight Sparkle knows something. And they're right. But essentially, they're like, okay, well, we have to figure out what happened. We have to stop this whole thing. And Twilight explains, well, we need to find the elements of harmony. And that means we're going to have to go through the Everfree Forest. And of course, this episode can really be summed up very simply. And we're already kind of running rather long here. We're almost at an hour. So I'm going to try to sum up this episode as simply as possible.
I just want to say, it's interesting to note, though, that the elements of harmony were left in the ancient castle of the Pony Sisters, whereas in Season 2 they moved to the vault in Canterlot, where they're obviously easier to get at. So it makes you think, did Celestia think she'd never actually need them again?
Well,
maybe.
That's actually the thing, though, is they're easier to get at while they're at the abandoned castle. You have to travel through the Everfree Forest, which has dangers and stuff like that. But technically, the vault is the most secure place for the elements of harmony once they are restored. Because the only time the elements of harmony don't get accessed by the main six due to, them being taken is by Discord. And Discord's already shown, Celestia's magic is as of nothing to him. He is Q. There is no shield alive that could hold a Q prisoner. This is essentially how he is, And so while Celestia has the best of her magics on that vault, nothing could get through, he overcomes it like it was child's play. And the only other time they have to get the elements of harmony, they're stopped because there's an army of changelings in their way. So it's not exactly easy to get to the vault, let alone actually get to the vault, get the elements of harmony, get back to the throne room, and use the elements of harmony. Back to the episode.
We should call this episode Back to the Episode.
Yeah, we've gone on so many tangents already, but I guess it's because this is where everything began, There's so much stuff to talk about, especially now that we have so much hindsight in regards to these episodes because of the new stuff being introduced in Season 2. We go back to the episode, okay. They go through the Everfree Forest, and each of them essentially has a test of character. We've got Applejack's test of honesty, which is more like less honesty and more like trustworthiness in its delivery in this whole thing, because she's holding on to Twilight, and she's like, Twilight, let go. Trust me, I'm telling you the truth. Believe me, you'll be fine.
Well, trustworthiness and honesty are similar things anyway, because you wouldn't trust somebody who's not honest, would you?
Well, I could give you the Jack Sparrow opinion of honesty versus dishonesty and trustworthiness, but I don't think we need to confuse anyone any more than they probably already are listening to us.
So you're saying that I will remember this day as the day that I almost got an explanation in the terms of Captain Jack Sparrow?
No. Now I just want to watch those movies
again. The truth
again.
is, sometimes people are dishonest. And that's a good thing, because you can always count a dishonest man to be dishonest. Honestly, it's the honest ones you have to watch out for, because you never know when they're going to do something completely stupid. So they're going through the Everfree Forest. Applejack's test of her element essentially is the honesty. Rarity's is generosity when she cuts off her tail to give to the grieving sea serpent, which the fans all know as Stephen Magnet. Thank you, YouTube captions.
Even the voice actor refers to him as Stephen Magnet these days. If you listen to our interview with him.
Yeah, so we've got Applejack's as the whole collapsing cliffside thing. We got Rarity's as the generosity with the tail thing. We got Fluttershy's, which is the manticore who has a thorn in his paw. And it's like, seriously, Nightmare Moon, the worst you could think of to entice this manticore into a rage was to turn yourself into a thorn and shove said thorn into his paw. You couldn't just, cast a glamour upon him to go into a rage?
Well, I guess that means that the manticore was just a thorn in the main six's side.
Oh.
One of these days, Crescendo, bang, zoom, straight to the moon. Okay, and then we've
Terrible.
got Pinkie Pies, which is the first song we ever get in the series, Giggle at the Ghosty. So,
Oh, a good classic.
classic song. I love how the main six reacts. I love how the protagonists react to Pinkie Pie starting the song with the whole, like, she isn't going to sing, is she? It's like, she is. And then, of course, we got Rainbow Dash, who is encountered by the Shadow Bolts, who, you know what? For being simple illusions created by Nightmare Moon, the Shadow Bolts have a really large fan following.
I bet they're cool.
And I really do like the callback in Luna Eclipsed where Rainbow Dash is trick-or-treating as a Shadow Bolt and playing pranks on people was actually a really nice callback to this episode.
I definitely think the Shadow Bolts are the strongest of Nightmare Moon's illusions, especially the most memorable as well.
I would probably agree on that end. But they finally get to what some of the fandom actually refers to the castle as Castle Midnight, because that was what the castle of Tirak in Gen 1 was called. Tirak was the bad guy in Gen 1 Ponies. And it actually makes sense, because if this was the castle where Luna used to reside, which it could be, which is why it is fallen into disarray, and we know that Luna doesn't sleep in Canterlot during the daytime because she actually has to fly back to Canterlot in the season 2 finale. She has to fly back to Canterlot to take her place.
Are you sure that's flying back into Canterlot or just flying to the top of the tower?
Well, I believe she had to come through the force field.
Yep, she did.
Yeah, she had to come through the force field. So she wasn't just flying up from some other point in Canterlot. She was actually flying like into Canterlot through the force field. For all we know, Castle Midnight might have been repurposed and, refurbished, renovated back into Luna's own personal abode after the events of her return, We don't know for certain, but yeah, the fans like to refer to this as Castle Midnight because the whole midnight thing goes with Luna's whole being the princess of the night, and also because it's a nice little callback to the first generation of ponies and the very first episode, the small little movie, I guess you could call it, the pilot, Escape from Castle Midnight. Or Rescue at Castle Midnight, I should say. I was mixing that up with Escape from Castle Wolfenstein. Forgive me.
Because they're so easy to mix up.
Hey, I was watching a Let's Play of the original Escape from Castle Wolfenstein for the PC the other day, so, sue me. But getting back to the topic at hand for the 50th time this review, they get to Castle Midnight, and they see the elements of harmony, which for all intents and purposes just look like gigantic stone orbs. And 5 of them decide to give Twilight her space while she tries to trigger a magical reaction from the stones. And then Nightmare Moon's mist shows up, and Twilight's sparkle follows the mist as it sweeps up the elements of harmony, and it teleports them to a different section of the castle, where Twilight has her showdown with Nightmare Moon.
Since the necklaces and the tiara that Twilight gets from the elements of harmony...
No. Not tiara. Big crown thingy.
Big crown thingy, yep.
Big crown thingy, yep.
But since those display the cutie marks of the main 6, it makes you wonder, the stone orbs that you see, are they based off cutie marks or are they just random symbols?
I believe they just have the generic little symbol that looks like a jewel on them. They just have that generic little jewel symbol like appears in the storybook that she's reading, because they were just 6 different colored jewels, almost like rupees from Legend of Zelda. They had that shape like they were rupees.
That leads to a further question then. Do the elements of harmony change over time?
Possibly. They might adapt to base themselves around who their wielder is at this point in time in the universe, Moonlight just gave us a little screen cap here that shows that they do have symbols. Only one of them is a symbol, well, actually 2 of them, I guess, since the other one's a diamond. But only 2 of them could really be said to have symbols that are the same as the cutie marks of the main 6, and that's the diamond and the 6-point star. But the other ones are it looks like a pentagon, a circle, I think that's a square, or a very elongated octagon, and a triangle. So, yeah, there you go. Not all of them have the symbols of the cutie marks on them until after they are made into the necklaces and the big crown thingy. Twilight Sparkle has her showdown. She charges at Nightmare Moon. She uses her teleporting trick, which was referred to in Gen 1 as winking out. They never refer to it as such here, and I don't think the fans would approve of the term anyways.
I don't think they ever name it.
They never refer to it at all, which actually kind of bugged a lot of fans in episodes like with the Hydra and stuff like that, because nobody ever refers to the fact that Twilight has this ability to teleport, and other unicorns can probably do it too, depending on their magical aptitude.
Maybe she just needs to increase her level. Get a better teleport spell.
She's only got the basic teleport spell. She doesn't have improved teleport. Or she's not of a high enough level to go any more than 100 feet in front of her.
She can't learn Dimension Door yet.
Great, that's just what we need. More Dungeons & Dragons references.
Hey, you owe us a Dungeons & Dragons campaign.
I know that I owe you a Dungeons & Dragons campaign. I'm working on it. I've been playing Pathfinder with my brothers lately.
Yeah, Pathfinder's probably better.
Okay, we need to get back to the episode before I get caught up in a Pathfinder conversation. This is My Little Pony, not Pathfinder.
My Little Pathfinder.
So you're saying you might just lose your way?
Actually, I was thinking more like I had gone off the beaten path. Bazinga!
Anywho, Q, Nightmare Moon shattering the elements, Twilight gasping in shock, her friends showing up, then obligatory friendship speech, and then magical girl transformation sequence. Or rather, henshin.
I don't think you could really call it a henshin or magical girl transformation sequence because the only thing they get is a necklace. They don't get any interesting outfits. They don't get any...
They're ponies. What else are they going to get,
Well,
really?
I mean, I'm sure you've seen the fan art of Trixie Lulamoon.
Yeah, I guess I have. Anywho, they get their necklaces, Twilight gets her crown thingy, and then Rainbow of Awesome appears. And just goes not as crazy as G1 with T-Rex exploding, but at least we get Nightmare Moon surviving. Otherwise, we wouldn't get Luna.
It really did feel like a callback to me, especially...
It probably was a callback.
They use the elements of harmony to channel the most powerful power in anything in the Pony universes, alternate universes or not. They channeled the power of the Rainbow of Light. And so the Rainbow of Light can do whatever the heck the people at the hub want it to do. So it cleanses the fury and the rage and the evil and the jealousy from Luna's heart and turns her back into Luna. And of course, I am certain that half of the reason why so many people have this idea of Luna just being a misunderstood little whoopee is because of how she looks after she's been turned back into Luna. And of course, we had an explanation from the show's creators, or rather from Lauren Faust, the explanation that she gave, which isn't to be taken as 100% official canon, but it may as well be. It's from Lauren Faust, is that the reason she looks so young and different from her sister at the time is because she was not at her full power, because she just experienced a very drastic transformation back to what she was before Nightmare Moon, before the evil that had seeped into her heart from all of her jealousy had managed to corrupt her so much.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good explanation for it. I accept it as canon.
I agree. It's from Word of God, after all.
No. Remember, Faustus stated, since she's no longer working on the show, anything she said can and probably will change.
Well, yeah.
But she was working on the show in Season 1.
Yes.
And that was a Season 1 episode.
Yeah, but because she's not working on the show for Season 2 or any subsequent seasons, they can easily change whatever plans she might have had at the time.
Oh, of course.
That was the point.
Because if it's not explicitly stated in the show, if she says it outside, it can change.
So there's a big huzzah, Twilight Sparkle. She had the realization that everyone was her friend, and that was what allowed them to activate the elements of harmony and, all that jazz. And then they have a big old celebration, and Luna's with them, and there's a big party, and everybody's happy, and cue credits. After, of course, I forgot to add, Twilight Sparkle wants to stay in Ponyville with her new friends, so Celestia gives her the ongoing task of reporting to her the lessons and values and magic of friendship.
And that ends the episode. And most of the people listening were probably hooked after those two. I know I was.
Those were my first episodes.
While the first episodes I watched were those, I probably won't say that I was hooked until... Geez. I don't know. I don't think I was hooked until quite a few episodes in, actually. It was definitely before episode 10. I can't pinpoint the episode I was hooked right now.
Also, one thing we didn't mention is that Pinkie Pie displays her wonderful fourth wall breaking powers right at the end of this episode, where she bursts through the blackout scene, going, "Are you excited? Because I'm excited. I've never been so excited. Except for the one time I went, huh? But I mean, really? Who can top that?"
Well, they certainly did top of the next few episodes.
Yeah, they wouldn't... All things considered, while this wasn't the episode that got me hooked, it was definitely strong in its own sense. It did a good job, in my opinion. It did a good job with the characters, introducing them, giving us a reason to like them, pointing out where their various strengths lied. And it was very character-oriented, and at the same time, it was the first episode of My Little Pony in years to have a villain. Even if it was a villain that winds up redeemed through magical phlebotinum at the end of the episode, the magical MacGuffin of the elements of harmony.
Or for you British or Canadian or non-American people out there, phlebotinia.
Well, phlebotinium.
Yep.
But anyways, once again, we're getting off track. Stop that. All that being said, let's go ahead and give our scores. We'll go ahead and start with Moonlight. What about you, Moonlight?
5. It got me into the series. It was different from almost all the previous generations. I mean, Generation 1 notwithstanding, because that one T-Rex died and exploded, and that was kind of awesome. But it was definitely really solid. It's this thing, it started the whole series, it pretty much created a subculture in the Brony fandom. I can't really give it anything less, because while there are a few flaws, it's rather solid overall.
I'd have to agree, actually, and give it a 5, because it just went to show that cartoons are not lost, even in this age. There was amazing writing, amazing animation. It's just such a feel-good show that, yeah, I have to give it a 5. This was the 2 episodes that started it all.
I would probably have to agree. I would say a 5 because it gives you good opportunity. It gives you good opportunity to get to know these characters. You understand what characters are going to be about, kind of just because of the fact that the opening is a bit of a spoiler in and of itself, because the opening shows Applejack and Pinkie Pie and Rarity and Fluttershy and Rainbow Dash and Twilight all as friends. And that kind of spoils what's going to go on in the episode. But the episode does a good job of showing why these characters become Twilight's friends. The episode does a good job of showing their personality traits, their various different strengths, the way that they are characterized, and how they work in tandem with Twilight and how they bounce off of each other. They give you a reason to enjoy them. It's also very fun, especially with parts like Giggle at the Ghosty. And you can actually like a lot of the callbacks to other stuff, too. Like me, I grew up watching Disney films, like many American children do. I grew up watching Disney films, classics like, Sleeping Beauty, Snow White, and stuff like that.
Alice in Wonderland.
Beauty and the Beast, Alice in Wonderland. And
I need to watch that again.
It probably helps that Hasbro owns Wizards of the Coast, because that means they can do whatever the heck they want with tons and tons of fantasy creatures from the universe of D&D, which is in and of itself a nice little shout out to anyone who might play D&D who watches. But they also have a lot of shout outs to those classics that I watched as a kid. Like when Nightmare Moon appears, she has this very Maleficent boastfulness, and she appears in this burst of magical energy, and she even has line for line, with exception to the fact that it's foals instead of fools, because they have to shove those pony puns in there. She says, "Stand back, you foals," to the guards as the guards try to attack her. And those great little small things that really made me have fun with this two-parter. The fact that it was a two-parter was really good, because it's very rare that a pilot will get a two-parter Like I said, when we did our riff tracks of Rescue at Midnight Castle, the movie, the pilot, I guess, is only 23 minutes long. It's the length of only one episode, and they had to shove a lot into that one episode. This has a lot more time to work with, the time to build up these characters, give you a reason to like them, give you a reason to like their quirks, and you kind of want to see them succeed by the end of it. So I'd say it's definitely a 5. It does what it's supposed to do. It pulls people in, it makes them interested, and the characters are actually interesting. They're characters that you can look at and you can see that while traits of them are exaggerated, they very much reflect real people that you could meet in real life. Unlike previous incarnations of the ponies, like in Generation 3 and 3.5, which, had the incredibly overly cutesy, hyper-deformed ponies who were all over the place when it comes to just how saccharine their world was. And this is a much more believable take, and the characters come off as believable. They come off as realistic personalities. Even though they're ponies, you can see these creatures as people. You couldn't do that with incarnations like Generation 3, because they were very much like the epitome of all things stereotypically girly in the eyes of television advertising. They just shoved it down your throats. So yeah, this is a 5 for me. The characters were strong. The plot was interesting. There was plenty of callbacks to other great things. Plenty of small little generic things that may or may not have been shout-outs but worked just as well. And the animation was good too. It's one of the big things that, like, classic cartoons that have been remade by the Hub into more modern versions like Strawberry Shortcake and stuff like that, they've all gone this route of CGI animation, which to me, I highly dislike. Computer-generated imaging. While I know that some people will say, like, Flash animation is still computer-generated animation, the fact that it's two-dimensional and that it's, like, still drawn in such a way as to, like, it really tells you cartoon in that classic sort of cartoon feeling. And that really appeals to me. So, we've got a 5 from Moonlight, we've got a 5 from Crescendo, and we've got a 5 for me. So, this, of course, is a must-see episode, because it is the episode that began it all. So, with that being said, I think that's just about time we wrap it up. We're almost at an hour and a half here. So, we'll go ahead and say our goodbyes now. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brushin Bones.
I'm Crescendo.
And I'm Moonlight.
And we will see you in the next installment of Everfree Radio. How Equestria was made, but more so that in the past, there were 2 unicorn sisters, and despite the fact that they have both a unicorn horn and Pegasus wings, they do use the specific word unicorn. I'm making sure to share this with you, because throughout the fandom, we have some words that we have come to associate with the princesses, Princess Celestia and Luna and Mi Amore Cadenza. They have unicorn horn and Pegasus wings and all of the abilities therein. So the fans took it upon themselves to come up with their own name for what they are that differentiates them between your generic unicorn and your generic Pegasus. It's pretty divided between the use of alicorn and pegacorn, but I'd say that alicorn is probably the majority.
Or just plain out winged unicorn as well. That's pretty commonly used.
Yeah.
I think it should be Unisys. That'd be awesome.
A Unisys? I think that sounds a little bit too much like UNICEF. It reminds me of those Trick or Treat for UNICEF commercials.
It makes me think of a car. Try the new Unisys today.
But you don't drive an alicorn. I guess you could, maybe, somehow.
Well, we haven't been introduced to any humans in the series yet, so nobody's had to ride one.
You could attach a steering wheel to the horn.
Oh, gosh. Well, the only reason I bring this up is because one of our fellow staff members, tends to get really, really volatile about the whole alicorn pegacorn thing, stating that because they are canonically called unicorns in the first episode, that they should be referred to as such, and that everyone should at least be educated about this factoid. That way they can choose for themselves whether they want to use the fanon term or the canon term. So we decided to do him the service of informing everyone they were called unicorns in the first episode. As for me personally, I always generally just refer to them as alicorn, because while I know that an alicorn is actually the term for a unicorn's horn, it's easier to differentiate the princesses with a term that separates them from the unicorns, because they are very clearly and very blatantly shown to be more powerful than your generic unicorn, more powerful than your generic Pegasus.
I personally think we should just use the term princesses, because all three of them are princesses. The only three that we've seen in the show are princesses, and until a time we come across one that isn't a princess, I think princess is a safe word to use.
I'm just curious as to whether or not later on in the show, Season 3, Season 13, however many seasons this show gets.
Season 42.
I'm just wondering if we will ever see a prince. Not a prince like Prince Blueblood, or a prince like how I guess you might be able to consider Shining Armor a prince, since he has now married a princess, but an actual prince in the term of a winged unicorn, alicorn, pegacorn prince.
Unisys.
Now, I get that a lot of people are going to be like, oh, they're probably never going to do that, or it's just wishful thinking on the part of the male viewers, or, there's enough of that crud in fan fiction, but you do have to kind of wonder if they're ever going to introduce one. Anyways, we have gotten way off the beaten path here.
What's this about an episode? We're talking about an episode here?
Yes. So back to the actual episode review. We are being told the story, as narrated by Princess Celestia, eventually transitioning into the voice of our main protagonist, Twilight Sparkle. We are being told the story of the Mare in the Moon, Nightmare Moon, who was the sister who brought up the moon for the night, who became jealous of the daylight's popularity with pony kind, while all of the unicorns and Pegasi and Earth ponies slept through and shunned her beautiful night. So she got jealous of her sister and decided, you know what, I'm just going to make the night last forever. And the bitterness and anger in her heart transformed her into an evil mare of darkness, Nightmare Moon.
See, this could have all been averted if she just asked the ponies, why do you always sleep through my night? She jumps to assumptions and thinks, oh, they must dislike the night. I must become evil and make it night forever.
Well, Crescendo, think about it this way. When we act...
Hello and welcome to Everfree Radio. I am your host, Brushin Bones.
I'm Crescendo.
And I'm Moonlight.
And today we are bringing to you our review of Season 1, Episode 1 and 2, the two-parter that started it all, Friendship is Magic. Now, it's been a long time in coming, and with this dry spell for summer of 2012, we wait for Season 3 to be finished up and put on television. We're going to go ahead and take a look back at the season that it all began with this Brony fandom. So, we'll have at least a little bit of pony to fill our time while we wait for the horrible, horrible dry spell of no new pony episodes to finally end.
So we get a little bit of pony, and then a lot of pony.
What are we going to do in Season 3 yet? We won't have any more pony to review.
We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Don't think too far ahead. You're going to make us worry too early for no good reason.
We'll take out the DeLorean. That's what we'll do.
Oh, gosh.
That sounds like a plan to me.
Okay, so it all began with a book opening up to the classic words, Once Upon a Time. And it tells us all about Equestria. Not exactly...
We actually do see Luna later on, when she comes back, she asks every pony to kneel before her.
Well, and see, what you gotta understand is 1,000 years ago, they had a very different culture as well, as is shown with the whole royal cantaloupe voice, the speaking with the traditional royal we, all of that sort of thing. In the past, 1,000 years ago, when she was imprisoned, and before that, they had a very clear-cut view that the royalty was above the common folk. I get this feeling that she wasn't going to stoop so low as to have to ask, why do you hate my knight? The night in her eyes was a thing of beauty, and that they chose to sleep through it at all for any reason kind of seemed like they were shunning it. Now, admittedly, if you were to take a little bit of logical thinking beyond the idea of what a children's show will normally provide, most creatures, horses, or even us humans, are not nocturnal. And creatures that are sapient and do stuff like farming and stuff like that work during the daytime because that's the most effective time to work. And when they work during the day and are awake during the day, they are, of course, going to sleep through the night. And of course, if you get into the whole concept of what would actually happen if the day were to never come again and it would be night eternal, Nightmare Moon obviously wasn't thinking very clearly, because if she was to never allow the sun to be raised again, entire